All right, hopefully that works. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your patience. Sorry for the technical difficulties this morning. Sometimes the best laid plans have to be worked on a little harder. So I appreciate your patience, and let's get started. Welcome to StoneTalk. I'm your host, Jason Osgood. I'm the Senior Director of Distribution for Stone Hardscapes. If you're new here, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have participated in the past webinars, thank you for coming back. This is a monthly webinar series that talks about all aspects of natural stone, from installation to technical, to makeup of the stone itself, to care and maintenance. If you're new here, or if you have joined us in the past and you've missed one of the first 5 episodes, our first 2 episodes, we talked about installation, from basic techniques to advanced techniques. We dug into coping installation from start to finish. We got into natural stone world and governance, and what the Global Stone Institute is doing to help transparency in the industry. And then last month, we talked about natural stone care and maintenance. And as always, if you haven't been able to watch these live, or you want to go back and watch them a second time, you can always go to the Stone Hardscapes YouTube channel and watch one of our posted videos up there. All of mine will be up there, as well as our senior design consultant, Linda Abbott's. All of her virtual design talk webinars will be there as well. We also have multiple short videos about different types of stone, about certain types of stains, everything you really can imagine when it comes to the stone world itself. So I encourage you, when you have some time, go and take a look at some of these great videos that we posted. Now let's dig into it. The one thing that all these natural stones have, regardless of whether or not you do a travertine stone or you do marble, is just the aesthetic value of the stone itself and what it brings to your backyard environment. However, one of the first things you want to do is understand the technical specs of the stone itself and whether or not it will fit into the environment you want it to fit in. Some natural stones are very brittle and can't handle the load that will be put on them in a backyard setting, whether it's a pool or it's a patio. Some natural stones are incredibly dense and the top matrix is very slick. You want to make sure that the stone you put down fits. And with that, we want to dig into a 4-part series here on testing and assurances. The one thing that you can absolutely be assured about with Stone Hardscapes is that we test all of our material. And we test them in 4 major categories. The first test is the older version of the ASTM C1028, and then the ANSI A137.1, which is a coefficient of friction test. This test method is for determining the static and dynamic coefficient of friction of ceramic tile and other like surfaces by a horizontal dynameter pull meter method. This is your grip test. This assures you that your material that you put around on your patio or your pool has the grip necessary. Second test that we do is the ASTM C170 compression strength test. This is a test method to determine the differences in comprehensive strength between various dimensional stones, including granite, limestone, marble, and sandstone. This is the test that gives you the actual strength of the stone itself to make sure that it can handle the load. The ASTM C666M15 freeze thaw. This is a standard test method for resistance of material to rapid freezing and thawing. This test is very important for those of you who are above the freeze thaw line to assure you that as the temperatures drop and the water accumulates and freezes, that the material itself can withstand those harsh environments. And going right along with the freeze thaw test is the ASTM C97 water absorption and density test. This is the standard test method for absorption. If it doesn't pass the absorption, it's not going to pass the freeze thaw test. This is to make sure that the stone itself falls within the porosity parameters that the stone should, so that it's not absorbing too much water, because if it absorbs too much water in a freeze thaw environment, it will fail. And keep in mind that there are no products from a decking standpoint that can be put on a commercial application without this testing data. It's the first thing they will ask to make sure that it meets the parameters. So the most important one really out of all of these is the coefficient of friction. The coefficient of friction covers all natural stones in every environment. And I say it's the most important because everywhere that this stone can be installed, can be sold, you have to have the coefficient of friction. In Florida, in some of the warmer states, you don't technically have to have the freeze thaw, even though we still test it, but everything has to have the coefficient of friction. So let's dig into the coefficient of friction. What is coefficient of friction? Simple question. Coefficient of friction is the ratio of the force between two objects when one object is moving, or if both objects are moving against each other. The coefficient of friction is dimensionless and does not have any unit of measure. It is also secular, meaning the direction of the force does not affect the physical quantity. So if you take your hands and rub them together up and down, that's friction. That's the coefficient of friction. But it doesn't change if I rub my hands side to side. So that's secular, that's scalar. That is the meaning behind that. In layman's terms, it's a traditional measurement of slip resistance. It gives you some assurance. Now, the higher the COF, or the higher the coefficient of friction, the greater the resistance and the friction there. So a standard decking product that is tumbled will have a lower coefficient of friction than a standard decking product that has an extreme grip on it. Now, there are two different types for our industry. There's a static coefficient of friction, or the static COF, which is the older ASTM-C 1028 version. It is the force measurement to move one object over another object that is stationary. So again, my hands, if I leave my left hand stationary and I start rubbing my right hand up and down, that is a static coefficient of friction. Think of it as the force it takes to push a sled from a standstill. That's a static coefficient of friction. The newer dynamic coefficient of friction, the ANSI A137.1, is the force measurement that must be overcome to keep an object that's already in motion moving over another object. So think of that as a force it takes to keep that sled in motion. So once you get that sled started, the force it takes to keep it going, that's dynamic coefficient of friction. Again, the dynamic coefficient of friction is the new industry standard for measuring a surface's slip to resistance, and is quickly replacing the static coefficient of friction. Now, it does not mean that the static coefficient of friction will not be accepted. It does not mean that it does not pass parameters. It does, but the dynamic coefficient is becoming the new standard. So all of the new testing coming out that you see on natural stone is more in line with the dynamic, the DCOF, than it is for the static coefficient. The dynamic measures resistance during motion. Like I said, while the static measures slip resistance to put on an object in motion. The reason it's becoming the norm is because it is more relevant to when somebody's walking on a deck. So the new standard is more accurately measures a surface's slip resistance when walking. Think about people walking around a deck, walking on a patio. That's the dynamic coefficient of friction. The DCOF testing standard is always conducted with a wet, slightly soapy solution of 0.05% sodium lauryl sulfate in water. That is why there's only one score from a dynamic coefficient of friction. As with the static coefficient of friction, we had a dry score and a wet score. With the dynamic, we only have one score now. And unlike the static coefficient of friction, the new DCOF is more accurate, and it can be conducted in the field with a portable machine called the BOT 3000 or the BOT 3000. The standard coefficient of friction in our industry is 0.42. Now, very important to understand this, and we'll mention this again before this presentation is over, is that the coefficient of friction, whether it is static or it is dynamic, the values of the surface will change over time. As that surface wears out and wears over time, the coefficient of friction will change. So if you get a product that has an extreme grip, that is a sandblasted product that has a higher coefficient of friction, that coefficient of friction will lessen over time as that texture wears. And as I said before, the dynamic COF, or the ANSI A137.1, is becoming more relevant and more widely used worldwide. Now, there's really two reasons to understand coefficient of friction, two very important reasons. The first, it provides a level of comfort and safety for you and your customers in their decking material. If we offer product that do not meet the standard coefficient of friction around a swimming pool, whether it's residential or it's commercial, and somebody slips and falls, that becomes an issue. But we can confidently say that everything that we have passes those testing. And because they pass that testing, there's a level of comfort and safety that you can provide for your customer, and that customer can provide for their family. The other most important aspect is you cannot put a decking material down on a commercial project that does not meet or exceed the standard coefficient of friction. That is why it's incredibly important to understand what the COF is of the deck material that you purchase, or the deck material that you provide. Stone Hardscapes, we will provide you with all the testing data that you need for all the material that we can sell to you. If you're getting material elsewhere, please get the testing data, have the testing data with you, and understand what the COF is, and understand what the coefficient of friction is on that material. Now, takeaway from this is make sure that your decking products have been tested by a reputable, independent testing lab. Get the paperwork, have it handy with you. Our website has all the paperwork and has all the testing data on it. You can request it from us in a paper form if you would rather do it that way. Understand that your deck's coefficient of friction will change over time as the product wears. Again, we talked about it a few minutes ago. If you get a product like an Ice Extreme, which is a sandblasted material, which gives you an extra level of assurance of a grip, over time, that sandblast, that texture will wear. That will wear smooth over time, depending on how much traffic is on it, whether it's a commercial pool or a residential pool. But over time, the coefficient of friction will lessen. The higher the coefficient of friction, the greater the resistance, the greater the grip. And I said this before, all products, every decking material that we sell has been rigorously tested and has met or exceeded standard coefficient of friction measurements. All of our material has passed the older standard, the ASTM C1028, and all the newer products are passing the ANSI A137.1. Again, there's no problem with the ASTM standard. It's just as the industry grows, the testing is now leaning more towards the dynamic side because it is more accurate and because there's one test score and not a dry and a wet. But you can be assured all products from Stone Hardscapes have been rigorously tested and have met or exceeded the standard coefficient of friction measurements. Now, this was a short webinar. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your standing by earlier with the technical difficulties that we have. We will dig into the remainder of the testing in the next few episodes. Please join me second Tuesday of next month as we continue this series, and then second Wednesday of next month as we continue the series, and then following this tomorrow, which is the third Wednesday of every month, you can join Linda Abbott, our senior design consultant, when she talks about aesthetic values of products. She does a very good job with that. I encourage everyone to participate. And if you have any questions, by all means, you can reach out to me at my email address at jason.osgood@stonehardscapes.com, or you can reach out to our office and talk to any one of our staff who are incredibly knowledgeable on the material. Thank you for your time today. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you next month.